The stone steps of the Great Temple are slick and dark. At the summit, a priest raises a newly severed head, its features still warm in the dawn light. Then, a sound rises, not a scream, but a whisper, carrying words from the gods themselves. This is the chilling claim at the heart of an Aztec mystery. Priests of a vast and sophisticated empire reported that the heads of their sacrifices could speak. By the end of this investigation, you will understand the shocking truth behind these whispers from the dead. We will walk the sacred pyramids and stand before the terrifying skull racks known as the Tzompantli. We will separate grim reality from supernatural legend, asking what could make a holy man believe a lifeless head was talking to him. What does a civilization believe when it hears its own gods in the silence after death? To understand that whisper from the sacrificial stone, we must first understand the man who claimed to hear it. He was not a common soldier or a village elder. He was a tlamacazqui, an Aztec priest. His world was one of terrifying responsibility, where the fate of all existence rested on his shoulders. This was a role that demanded far more than ritual brutality. These men were the empire's intellectuals, its astronomers charting the stars, its historians preserving sacred lore, and its most direct line of communication to the gods. Their training began in childhood, within the Kamakac, a school attached to the temple. Here, boys from noble families endured a life of extreme austerity. They practiced self-sacrifice, drawing blood from their own ears and tongues with magy spines. They memorized the complex sacred calendars, learned the movements of Venus and the Pleiades, and mastered the art of interpreting divine will from the flight of birds and the patterns of smoke. By the time a young man stood on the temple platform, he was a walking library of celestial knowledge and ritual precision. Draped in black robes stained with the soot of countless offerings, his hair matted with blood as a permanent badge of his office. His grim duty was driven by a cosmic emergency that defined Aztec reality. They believed the universe was fragile, perpetually on the brink of collapse. The sun, the great warrior Huitzilopochtli, required constant nourishment to continue his daily battle across the sky. This nourishment was a sacred life force called tonalli, an animating energy that resided in human blood, known poetically as chalchihuetl, or precious water. Without a steady supply of this divine fuel, the sun would simply stop, plunging the world into eternal darkness and ending the current cycle of creation. The priest's role, therefore, was not one of wanton cruelty, but of cosmic maintenance. He was a technician of survival, performing the essential work of feeding the engines of reality. Every act of sacrifice was a transaction, an exchange of human tonalli for divine favor, for rain, for fertility, for the continued rising of the sun. This context transforms the act on the temple. The victim was not merely a prisoner of war. They were a revered offering, a literal piece of fuel for the cosmos. In their death, they became a Tzompantli, a living image of the god themselves, their final moments a sacred drama. So when a tlamacazqui, this deeply trained, spiritually attuned scholar, later reported that a severed head had spoken, he was not describing a horror. He was reporting a theological event, a direct message from the very gods he spent his life trying to appease. The question then shifts from one of simple biology to one of profound belief. What did he hear or believe he heard in that charged and sacred silence? The captive warrior's final journey began with a strange and solemn honor. For days, sometimes weeks, he was treated with profound reverence, fed the finest foods, and dressed in the sacred regalia of a specific deity. He was no longer merely a prisoner of war. He had become an Ixapla, a living image of the god he was to embody in his final moments. This transformation was the entire point, a sacred drama where a mortal man became a vessel for divine presence. His ascent of the Templo Mayor was not a walk of shame, but a ceremonial procession, a slow climb up 114 steep steps toward the summit, where the sky met the earth. Crowds would have watched from the plaza below, a sea of people witnessing this ultimate exchange between the human and the divine. At the summit, the atmosphere was one of intense, focused ritual. The stone of the sacrificial platform, the atopali, was already stained from countless previous offerings. 4 priests, each representing a cardinal direction, would firmly but respectfully hold the ixipla, one on each limb, stretching him backwards over the curved stone so that his chest arched upwards. The chief priest, the tlamacazqui we have come to know, stood ready with his sacred tool, a razor-sharp blade of obsidian, a volcanic glass that could hold an edge sharper than modern steel. The act itself was swift, a single, practiced motion designed to quickly open the chest. The immediate goal was the still beating heart, the most concentrated source of that precious life force, the tonalli. This organ was reverently lifted toward the sun, an offering of sustenance to Huitzilopochtli to fuel his daily battle across the heavens. The body, now an empty vessel, was then dispatched down the steep pyramid steps, tumbling to the base where waiting priests would begin another sacred duty. But our focus remains at the summit, in the hands of the tlamacazqui, for immediately after the heart was offered, attention turned to the head. Using the same obsidian blade, the priest would skillfully sever it from the body. This was not an act of desecration, but another step in the ritual recycling of the sacred offering. The head, still warm, was carefully held aloft. Its blood was collected, its hair might be incorporated into ritual costumes, and the skull itself would later find a place of honor on the great Tzompantli, the skull rack that stood as a stark testament to the god's appetite and the empire's piety. This entire process, from the ceremonial ascent to the final severing, served multiple intertwined purposes. It fed the sun, yes, ensuring the world's survival. It also released life-giving energy to fertilize the earth for crops, and it commemorated sacred dates in the complex Aztec calendar, tying human action to celestial cycles. But for our mystery, the critical moment is this: the instant the severed head came into the priest's possession. It was warm, it was freshly separated, and in the eyes of the believer, it had just housed a god. In that charged silence, amidst the smell of copal incense and blood, with the weight of cosmic responsibility on his shoulders, the priest would look upon this object, and sometimes he would report that it spoke. The phenomenon emerges not from a scene of chaotic slaughter, but from the precise, reverent, and terrifying climax of a deeply held belief. These whispered words were not secret rumors, they were meticulously recorded history. Our most crucial evidence comes from the Florentine Codex, a monumental encyclopedia of Aztec life, compiled in the decades after the Spanish conquest by the Franciscan friar Bernardino de Sahagun. Working with Nahua elders and scribes, he preserved their accounts in their own words. Within its pages, we find a chillingly matter-of-fact report. Aztec priests themselves stated that after a sacrifice, the severed head would sometimes speak. It was said to utter prophecies, to deliver divine messages, or to simply cry out. One account describes a head calling out the name of the next victim to be taken. To the modern ear, this sounds like pure superstition or horror story fabrication, but Sahagun's informants presented it as a documented occurrence within their sacred practice. This forces us to take the claims seriously, not as literal truth, but as a genuine report of an experience. What could explain a group of highly trained, sober intellectuals all agreeing they heard a dead man speak? The first and most physical explanation lies in simple biology. In the moments after death, the body undergoes dramatic changes. Air can remain trapped in the lungs and the esophagus. As muscles relax and tissues settle, this air can be expelled, passing over the slack vocal cords. the result is not speech, but a groan, a sigh, or a guttural gasp, what we often call the death rattle. To a priest standing inches away, his mind saturated with ritual expectation and the belief that a god had just inhabited this body, such an involuntary sound could be profoundly misinterpreted. His brain, primed for a divine sign, would desperately seek to give that random noise meaning, transforming a biological spasm into a sacred pronouncement. This leads us to a second powerful psychological phenomenon, auditory pareidolia. This is the brain's tendency to find familiar patterns, like words or music, in random noise. You experience this when you think you hear your name called in a crowded room, or when you listen to a fan and swear it sounds like faint voices. For the priest on the temple, the auditory environment was anything but quiet. There would have been the wind whistling across the pyramid summit, the distant murmur of the vast crowd below, the crackle of ritual fires, and the chanting of other clergy. Layered over a death rattle from the head, his mind, in a state of extreme focus and religious fervor, could easily have constructed intelligible speech from the chaos. He heard what he needed, and perhaps even expected to hear. Furthermore, we must consider the priest's own altered state. While not all rituals involved psychoactive substances, the Aztecs had a deep pharmacological knowledge and used sacred plants like peyote, certain mushrooms, and lifeblood, a morning glory seed, to commune with the divine. A priest under the influence of such a powerful entheogen would be in a profoundly suggestible state, his senses heightened and his perception of reality fluid. In that condition, the line between internal vision and external event blurs completely. A sigh from the head could easily become a thundering oracle. Finally, we cannot discount the sheer physiological toll of the ritual itself. The priest had likely fasted, engaged in bloodletting from his own body, and existed in a state of prolonged sleep deprivation and sensory overload. The act of sacrifice was physically grueling and emotionally monumental, combined with the potent cocktail of adrenaline, exhaustion, and profound spiritual conviction. This could induce a state of religious ecstasy bordering on hallucination. In such a peak state, the message from the gods would not need to come from the head at all. It could erupt fully formed from the priest's own subconscious, projected onto the sacred object before him. So, did the heads literally speak, in a biological sense? Almost certainly not. But did the priests genuinely hear words, in their minds, within their framework of belief, and under those extraordinary conditions? The answer is a compelling yes. The voice was a collaboration, a terrible alchemy of biology, psychology, and absolute faith. Yet this mystery does not end with a sigh or a hallucination. The journey of the head and its perceived voice was only beginning. Its final destination was a structure designed to make the gods' power and the empire's might terrifyingly visible to every single person in the city. The severed head's journey was far from over. After the final whisper faded on the temple summit, the skull began its second, more public life as part of a chilling monument, the Tzompantli. This was not a hidden graveyard, but a towering, open-air archive of sacrifice, a structure designed to be seen, understood, and feared. Imagine a massive wooden framework, like a gruesome lattice, standing prominently in the sacred precinct. Upon this frame, hundreds of human skulls were meticulously mounted, often pierced through the temples on long horizontal poles, their empty eye sockets gazing out over the city in neat, parallel rows. The scale was deliberately overwhelming, a stark testament to the empire's reach and the gods' insatiable need. For an enemy ambassador or a rebellious subject, the message was one of sheer terror, a clear calculation of the cost of defiance. But for the Aztec citizen, its meaning was layered with profound reverence. This was not a trophy display in a modern sense. It was a sacred storehouse. Each skull represented a released parcel of that precious life force, tonalli, offered to sustain the cosmos. The Tzompantli was, in essence, a public ledger of piety, a physical proof that the essential work of feeding the sun and fertilizing the earth was being diligently carried out. Recent archaeology has given us a breathtaking sense of this scale. In 2015, near the foot of the Templo Mayor in modern Mexico City, excavators uncovered the main ceremonial Tzompantli of Tenochtitlan. The find was staggering, a rectangular platform adorned with row upon row of stone carvings of skulls, and within it, the actual remains of sacrificial victims. They uncovered over 650 skulls, along with thousands of fragments belonging to men, women, and even children. This was not a random pile. The skulls were arranged with deliberate order, forming a circular structure that may have supported the towering wooden rack described by the Spanish. This physical evidence forces us to reconsider the solitary moment of the speaking head. If the priest heard a divine message in that instant, was it a private revelation, or was the subsequent public display of the skull part of broadcasting that message? The transformation from a warm, whispering object to a bleached, permanent fixture on the rack suggests a process of institutionalizing the sacred. The individual voice of the god, whether real or perceived, was absorbed into the collective, silent roar of the monument. The personal prophecy became public doctrine, etched not in words, but in bone. The Tzompantli answered the cosmic question with grim certainty. Yes, the sacrifices are sufficient, the gods are fed. But it also raises a haunting new one. In this architecture of reverence, where did the individual humanity, or the individual voice, finally go? The voice from the stone was always an echo. It traveled from the priest's profound belief through the charged air of the temple's summit and into the historical record where we find it today. We have walked the path from the tlamacazqui school, where the priest learned the stars, to the terrifying and reverent act on the atop stone, and finally to the silent, collective testimony of the Tzompantli. The answer to our central mystery lies not in biology, but in belief. A severed human head cannot form words, but in the world of the tlamacazqui, it was never just a head. It was a vessel recently vacated by a god, an object crackling with sacred energy in a universe balanced on the edge of a knife. The sigh of escaping air, heard by a mind primed by ritual, fasting, and cosmic duty, became a divine whisper. The phenomenon reveals the core of Aztec reality, a world where the membrane between life and death was thin, where the human body was a source of world-sustaining power, and where communication with the gods was a constant, desperate necessity. So we are left with a final, lingering question, one without a single answer. Was the speaking head a neurological trick, a simple death rattle magnified by expectation? Was it a genuine miracle, a fleeting moment of divine contact in a system built to invite it? Or is it perhaps something else, a powerful metaphor? The Aztec Empire fell, its temples buried, but its voice was never truly silenced. It speaks to us through the intricate pages of the Florentine Codex, through the stark geometry of the excavated Tzompantli, and through stories like this one that challenge us to listen across the centuries to a people who believed completely that the gods were listening back. What do you think they heard? Share your own theories in the comments below. And if you want to join more explorations into the echoes of history, be sure to subscribe.